Hello and welcome to episode 106 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
And I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us for this new batch of episodes. We're really excited with the episodes that we've got coming up this season. If this is your first episode, though, at the Page One Podcast, we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, talk about how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips as possible. And as I say, we've got a great lineup this season. We've got a great back catalogue as well. So there's plenty to listen to if you're into your writing or into your reading, of course. And we even have a live episode this season, which we'll be telling you about at the end of the podcast. You can have a chance to come along.
You can see us in the flesh.
Yeah, but more excitingly, you can see Adrian Tchaikovsky in the flesh.
He's probably the larger draw than us, I suppose, at this stage.
Exactly. And I should say as well, before we move on to this week's guest, obviously Tarek is a published writer and he is now a CWA shortlisted debut writer.
Very exciting. Yeah, no, can't quite actually believe it, but yeah, it's been a nice surprise there, so keep my fingers crossed. When
do we find out
29th
the
of
date
June.
that you win it?
Yes, I get to go down to a nice meal in London and watch, which I'm pretty sure I know who's going to win it. Janice Hallett's on there for the appeal, and that book's just been massive. So she's got my money. After me, obviously.
That's very, very humble of you. I see what you're doing there. Lowering expectations.
Exactly. Then no one will suspect it when I come and scoop it up.
Yeah, no, but seriously, congratulations. We are all very proud of you at the Right Gear Towers.
Yeah, it's been parties non-stop at Right Gear Towers.
Exactly. But anyway, enough about us and this self-indulgent chat. Let's talk about this week's guest.
Yes, indeed. Who are we chatting with this week? We're chatting with Mary Kenney, who, if you are a video game player, you've almost certainly played some of her games that she's worked on. She's a writer who's worked on Telltale's The Walking Dead series, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, and she's working on the upcoming Wolverine game, which is very exciting. Yeah,
really interesting chat to talk to her about. You know, we've had a few people that have written video games before, obviously these more narrative video games, but it was interesting speaking to her because she's done that sort of Telltale sort of branching pathways type story, and that's really interesting. But also working on something like Miles Morales Spider-Man game is less of that branching pathway type story, but it still involves a lot of writing, in fact, which you might not appreciate on the, it's not just the main story that's being written, it's all the stuff around it and things like that. So it's interesting talking to her about that, and also hearing about how they go about recording it and stuff. Is quite interesting facts about that.
The Spider-Man game's more like a traditional script, I suppose, like a A to B linear story, but the way they go around it and the tech involved in it is all very interesting. So I think there's a lot to learn, even to like and learn, even if you're not a massive fan of playing video games. I think there's still a lot there that everyone will enjoy.
Absolutely. So we will get straight into it after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest and to give you more information about that live podcast episode that we'll be recording in just a few weeks.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer?
The first person who told me I was a good writer was my second grade teacher. And I think she might have been being nice because I was 8, so I can't imagine it was anything truly inspired. But I would say the answer is yes and no, in that I always loved writing. It was always one of my hobbies. I did it all the time, but I, like many writers, kind of bounced around what my dream job was. You know, 'cause you end up writing about all those dream jobs, but that's not, you don't pick one of them. So at various times as a kid, my dream job was to be an astronaut and to be a shark scientist, ichthyologist, and to be a, you know, like a professional caver and like all kinds of weird stuff. But by the time I got to college, I knew I wanted to be a writer of some description. But I was trying to be really practical. So I picked journalism in college. And then it wasn't until I had been a journalist for a couple of years that I realized my passion was really in fiction writing, and that I specifically wanted to do video games. So it was a bit of a winding path there, but I made it eventually.
And how did you make that move from journalism into game writing?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of game writers who started as journalists. I think the kind of the attention to detail and the level of research and the really like focused on your reader both being entertained and getting enough information to be able to do something translates really nicely between journalism and games writing. But this is the specific path was I applied to and got into grad school for game design at NYU. And the same year that I started grad school, I worked at Kotaku for a few months as a reviewer and as a journalist. And then I got my first game writing contract with a very small studio in Spain, and wrote a game about Vikings in the 6th century. And that was my first video game in I want to say 2016 was my first game.
Cool. And for someone who is trying to do that same kind of jump, you know, how do you, is that something you just kind of apply for, or do you need to have like an agent for that, or what's the kind of the path into sending in like an application?
Sure. Yeah, you don't have to have an agent the way that you do for publishing or for TV film. It's a little more ad hoc than that. There are plenty of job postings to apply for in full-time in-house studio positions mainly. But also, I mean, the way that I did it, so I always recommend it, but you know, there is no one path in, but being on social media in the places where gamers are, where game devs are, Twitter is the one I use because it's where all the game devs hang out. And, you know, I just kind of put out there that like, hey, I'm a writer, I'm really passionate about writing and I want to write games. And, a guy who had just founded a studio went, hey, we really need a writer, but we're itty bitty. Would you want to work with us at all? And that's how I got my first contract. And I mean, it was paid. I'm not saying you should work for free. Like, don't do that. But there are definitely different ways. There's that kind of just meeting people online or at cons and kind of getting contracts that way. And then there's also just applying to job postings. There are lots of paths in.
Was that the Great Whale Road? Was that the game? Yeah. And obviously, when you're approached by someone saying, we need a writer for this project, how much, you know, if you come up with an idea for a book, you're the one with the idea and you're the one that eventually will have to pitch it once you've written it and all that sort of stuff. But they must have the
the basis of the story or the idea of the story when they approach you? How much of it is already there when you sign on?
So a lot of that, I mean, it depends on the studio and the studio culture. But actually, typically in jobs I've worked, they don't have the basis of the story yet. The writer needs to help with that. But what they have are the mechanics in the genre. So they'll come to you and they'll say like, we want this to be a first person shooter, or we want this to be a turn-based co-op. So they'll come at you with those mechanics, or maybe they haven't even figured that out yet, but they're kind of exploring what mechanics they're interested in. So they'll come at you with that. And then from there, you do work with the team to be like, okay, what are we interested in? Like what kind of era, what kind of art style, what kind of like you kind of have to pull in all the departments, and then you can start pitching and coming up with story beats. Game writing is very, very collaborative. Like that's for sure. I would say it's more akin to TV writing than book writing or even film writing, in that there's a lot of people to work with. The art director, the creative director, the lead designer, everybody has a stake in the storytelling. So if you're a person who kind of wants to go off on your own and write a story, game writing might not be for you. But if you're someone who really likes bouncing ideas off other people from other disciplines, then it totally is.
And you were the lead campaign writer on that game. Am I right in saying? Was that your
Yes.
role?
Yes. It ended up having... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I was just asking what exactly that meant.
Yeah, it ended up having 3 campaigns based on 3 different civilizations. So at the top, you would pick, I'm the Danes, and then you would play for like 10 hours as the Danes, and then you could do a completely new storyline with another group. So I did 2 of the 3 that I wrote, and then just a bunch of side content like every game writer. So it was The Great Whale Road was a text-based game. So it was a ton of prose writing, which was really fun for me. I knew prose better at the time. So it was kind of a good entry point for me.
And I mean, looking at the way that games have kind of evolved, it really feels like the last maybe 10, 20 years, there's been a much more of a push into the story than there used to be when I was a kid playing games. They're a lot simpler, and I totally get that's kind of due to the power of the consoles, etc. You're able to do things which are more akin to movies or TV shows, or to show more stuff, or to have longer games, etc. And is that something which is quite, it's kind of lend itself naturally to having a need to get someone in to write stuff as opposed to just one person doing everything, and really having games that focus more on the writing rather than even the gameplay?
Sure. I think the size and complexity have driven a lot of that. There are some really interesting stories in those in games that were made in the 80s and 90s, but they're, as you said, the tools were a lot more limited, right? We had like text boxes, and we had like squeaking sounds maybe, and that was kind of all the consoles could support. And now, I mean, you're right with the power of the consoles, we can just be more complex. So I think it's less that we want to be like TV or film. Most of the game writers I know, I mean, we're inspired by it, like you're inspired by any media, but it's more that we have these tools. How can we use them plus gameplay and mechanics to really get people hooked into something that's interesting? Because there's a lot of really fascinating research on like what pulls players in and what keeps them in a game. And it's very, very different. I mean, there are people who are there entirely for the story and the characters. There are people entirely there for the loot. There are people entirely there for the challenge. So for most of us, it's okay, how can we make a game where all those people are going to get something? Even if you don't like the story and you're not paying attention, okay, well, you've got this awesome loot, like how, so we're just making these more complex experiences that have everything as much as we can. And then the reason there are more writers now is first because of the complexity, and that we do, want to tell better and better stories that are more and more emotional and satisfying. And two, like they're huge. they're so big. Like if you look at a game like the first Spider-Man game, I mean, that script is ginormous. It's several screenplays. Like, so if you only had one person doing that, like I don't know when they would sleep. Like that would be horrific.
And it's funny because you're totally right. You're seeing these games like Spider-Man, etc., which are these massive ones with huge amount of writing, and all the David Cage games are just 12 million films long, and there's all that. But then on the other side of that, you've got stuff like 12 minutes and stuff, which are a lot more smaller, which are games that could have been made 3-4 consoles ago. And they don't feel like they're really taxing much, but I kind of don't feel like there was as much of a drive to make those kind of games back in the day. I don't know what question I'm asking here, to be honest.
There were stories in the, like, you know, there was the point and click
I suppose that's
adventure games and stuff, which were very narrative driven, along with the problem solving as well. So I think there always has been some element of narrative storytelling in games.
Yeah. I mean, the entire Sierra Online catalog is built on storytelling. I mean, Roberta Williams was a writer first and foremost. And she didn't have the same tools that we have now, although eventually, like, she was investing in things like green screens and full orchestras. And I mean, they invested in a ton of that technology. But yeah, I think stories have been around for a while. They just didn't get as much attention maybe back in the day. But they were definitely there. I mean, some of my favorite gaming experiences as a kid were games with stories, but, like, you know, it was all text. It was limited or no voice acting, and I was in, baby. Like, it had me completely. Like,
and when you're writing it, obviously you've sat down with the whole team in all the different departments to work out the idea and stuff. But is there ever any pushback from a department saying, no, we're not going to be able to do that in this game, and you have to kind of rejig the whole thing? Do you have to be more open to changing your ideas even throughout the project?
Oh yeah, for sure. And for various reasons. One, the first and scariest word is scope. Like, things are just too big. And that can come from, that could be any number of reasons. For example, there was a scene I wrote in Walking Dead, the final season, and it did end up making the cut, but it was a lot of begging. I brought a lot of cookies to a lot of departments, but it was a big crowd scene. So there were like 8 characters in it. And, when you're writing a book, you can put in as many characters as you want. The pages are the same cost, but if you put 8 characters into a scene that all have to be animated, it's a much more expensive scene than, say, 2 characters talking to each other. So that scene almost got cut, not because it was necessary to this or wasn't necessary to the story, but because it was the most expensive scene in the episode I was writing. So the animation couldn't support it until we made cuts elsewhere. So scope is a big thing. How many people do we have? How much time do they have? How close are we to release? Another big scary thing. I mean, in films and TV, you get reshoots, and games have chunks that, like, the story's just not working. I mean, we do play tests too, and the story's not going well. So maybe we have to redo some parts. But how far are we? How many people do we have? How long until release? Like that, those problems are true for us too. So scope is a big one. The other one that comes up a lot is priorities. So it's, if let's say we have a big fight sequence and players love it, but the fight doesn't make any sense between the 2 characters who are having that fight. Like they wouldn't be at that point yet in the story. It's kind of design and narrative have to sit down and go, okay, can we move it? Can we put it somewhere else? Or does writing just need to figure out a way to make this make sense? Like, do we need to rejigger the story and their motivations? So, and there's not one right answer. Story's not always right. Design's not always right. Like, we all just kind of have to figure it out.
And is there like obviously I'm sure the answer is yes, but I take it there's a plan for the kind of the plot. And I know what you're saying, you had to be flexible and things have to get moved around and stuff, but I take it there's, how much of a plan is there beforehand, or is it much more open in terms of this is the end point, but we don't really know how we'll get there yet?
Yeah, it's, again, it kind of depends on the studio. Most studios that are story narrative driven, like they identify themselves that way, have an outline beforehand, and that from that outline comes mission lists and types of gameplay that we'll use in all those beats. But other studios, and this was actually more common, I would say 10 years ago, and it got us into a lot of trouble, frankly, was we would start building the game. And when I say we, I mean the industry, like not anybody specific, but you start building the game first and then kind of just let the writers throw words on top of it as they go.
Yeah.
And from that, you get a lot of very uneven narratives. Like, it's not a good way to plan out your story, for sure. But that said, I think one of the tricky things about game writing or any type of writing is sometimes you have good ideas when you're halfway through a project. Like, so you'll be writing, you have your outline, you have your plan, and you're writing a scene and something brilliant happens and it's beautiful and everybody loves it, but it broke all the scenes around it and it made all the levels around it real weird. So now we have to go to all those other departments and be like, can we make a change? Can we change all these things? So, it's creative works are always kind of in flux. It's just kind of the way it is.
And with games like The Walking Dead and Batman Enemy Within, with these ones that are sort of player choice games that have the branching paths and things like that, how, obviously when someone sits down to write a screenplay or a book, they have a very linear plot structure. They may not know it when they start at the beginning, but it has a structure that it sticks to throughout the book normally. But with a branching pathway, how do you know how many of those to do, and to write them as evenly as possible, presumably, because players could pick any way through it and join it all back up. How do you keep track of all of that?
Yeah, it's a doozy for sure. The way that we did it at Telltale that I think works really well is we called it role-playing rails. So let's say you're playing as Batman. There are 3 versions of Batman. There is scary Dark Knight Batman. There is compassionate, like knight in shining armor Batman. And then there's wisecracking, kind of sarcastic Batman. So those are your 3 role-playing rails. And you sketch out kind of the whole plot, and you have very strong characters around Batman who kind of have their stake in the ground, and they're going to react to Batman in different ways depending on which role-playing rail you're on, because those other characters are so strong and kind of have really strong personalities. So you have to sketch out good characters and then you have to sketch out kind of an overall plot. But then once you have your role-playing rails, you can say, okay, these are some things that Batman is going to experience. How would wisecracking Batman react in a way that's different from ruthless Batman, that's different from, and then the reputation that you build among other people and the way they talk to you and react to you is much different, whether they trust you, whether they'll help you, who is your enemy. So that's getting those rails and understanding your characters really early is more important than even in, I would say, other stories, even before you have the whole plot sketched out, because the plot follows the characters and the role-playing rails.
Obviously, with these stories that have the branching path, often what will happen is that you'll branch out, and sometimes you'll come back to, no matter what path you take, it'll drive you back to a certain point, and then you might split off again. But they often have differing endings. And as a writer, do you have a sort of definitive end in your head? Or, is there a true path through the game, or do you accept them all as potential paths?
It certainly depends, because I think even for branching stories, it's not always the right choice to have different endings. Sometimes it is, but not always. I think for Batman, it was a really good choice to have different endings depending on different Batmen that you're playing. It worked really, really well. And in that case, I would say, no, I don't typically have one ending in my head. This is the ending that would make sense for Ruthless Batman. This is the ending, this is how people would react to them. And this is the payoff that makes sense based on his arguments. Because that's another thing. Your main character is going through a different arc depending on what rail you've chosen. So the end of that arc thus has to be different. So that would be why those endings have to be different. Whereas something like Walking Dead, the final season, really had one ending. I mean, there were different characters could be there, different characters survived, some didn't. And, but the ending itself was the same for every player. And I think that was the right call. I know that was the right call because it was the end of Clementine's story, right? And Clementine is a character that we had known since season 1. And for her to have this ending, we basically know her arc through all 4 seasons, how she got here, results in one really satisfying ending versus I think it would have been a mistake to be either she lives or she dies based on whether you were nice or not. That would have felt really cheap, right?
Yeah, because I think that kind of the rail system of the Batman, that's really interesting, and I take it that must be really helpful in ensuring that no matter what your choices are, you're going to get a satisfying arc and a satisfying ending, and
Yeah.
and so either you do the Batman model of you've got your own kind of mini arc separate from the other two arcs, or you've got the Walking Dead one where you're getting pushed towards this big final ending. I think it's either way you're making sure that you control the player gets to a point where they feel they've earned, and they feel whether or not they know for sure if there was another ending or not, they feel satisfied with the ending and the journey that they took.
Totally. And a lot of it depends on kind of what is the point of your season, in that, like, for Batman, it was shaping your Batman. How does your Batman protect Gotham? So it makes sense that he would have different endings. Whereas for Walking Dead, for both seasons 1 and 4, it's how do you shape this child in your care? So it's not as much about your character going through an arc. It is, this is your character. How are they going to shape the people around them? And I think that does kind of shift the equation a little bit. Another thing that we tried a lot at Telltale, which was always fun, is trying to shove players who are generally on one rail into another rail, like making them face enough situations and enough characters that are difficult or push back on them that make you abandon the rail you're used to and go do something else. That's always fun because it just makes it makes players change throughout the course of the story. So that's kind of another example I like to use a lot is Lauren Me wrote episode 3 of the last season of Walking Dead. And there's a choice at the end. I'll try not to spoil it, but basically it's do you kill somebody or do you not? And she set up that scenario so that most people who play as really, really nice, which is the majority of Telltale players, but most people who play as nice will be sorely tempted to go ahead and pull the trigger, literally. And she, I mean, it took a lot of work and she nailed it. Most people did switch rails in that choice.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because the thing the Telltale games do, and also in David Cage's games, is they show you after the episode or after the game what choices players have made to that point. Is that because we had John Ingold of Inkle, who does he did Overboard and 80 Days, the mobile game, and things like that, branching storylines, and he said he wanted to keep that secret from the players and just let them experience their story, and he felt that showing that kind of took them out of it a bit and showed it was a game. If you obviously everyone knows it's a game, but you know what I mean. He felt that it kind of pulled them out of the game a bit. But did you find that it makes players go back and revisit their choices if they can see what other people have been doing?
I don't know that it did that as much. I don't think it did. I think it kind of pulls in almost a multiplayer element, even though it's a single player game. I think I would describe it more that way. It makes it, there's more of a community playing this game. I was recently talking to Adam Miller, who worked on Destiny for a long time, and he said the same thing because he also worked at Telltale. And he was like, it's episodic in a similar way because players are reacting to each other when you show them those stats. So I think if you really want to keep a player kind of immersed in the single player experience and their story and their choices, you wouldn't want to show them those stats. But if you want them to feel like they're part of a community and we're all watching it together, and that feeling of watching a TV show together and all like cheering or screaming together, then the stats make more sense. And players did. I mean, they posted on forums about it. They talked about it. They debated. Like, there was a big community around it.
It's true, because Life is Strange does something similar. You get a percentage of how many people gave the kid something or didn't, whatever. And I remember getting to the end of it was a David Cage one. It was the robot, the android one, Detroit. Detroit, and that one, as you say, at the end of it, I can't remember the end of the chapter, the end of the game, it kind of pulls out, and you've got this kind of spider web of pathways, and you could dive into scenes, and you could try and, so you'd always like, okay, in this scene I could have done something different to trigger a different path, and you could replay it again, try and work out. And I found that, and at first I was like, oh, that's awesome, I want to go and try and see if I can open a new path up, and then I did it a few times, and then I was like, actually, it took away from me. I almost felt like I was losing the point of that game for me. I kind of enjoyed the journey that I went on, and the point of it for me was the story that I ended up with.
Was your story? Yeah.
Exactly. It was my story. I didn't really want to see all the other permutations, I was happy with what I got, and I thought that was quite interesting. I didn't want to go down that, but I assumed I would have done, but it wasn't. It was interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a bad idea to have that be optional, honestly. Like
Totally,
toggle,
yeah.
do you want to see those branches? Do you not? I think could be an interesting design choice. I also like the spider web, but I was working at Telltale when Detroit came out, so it was more like as another interesting person, I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I know
it's amazing when you it just showed me as well how much planning and writing and tracking of all the stuff and the number of stuff you could have done or you could have missed, or and it was.
There's
the effort that goes into it.
There's lots of writing, presumably, that a player will never see. There's lots of a game that a player will never see. But you just have to be.
A lot of TV writers have asked me if that like depresses me that a lot of what we write will never be seen, and certainly me and a lot of game writers I know, it's actually the opposite. Like if I write something tucked into a little corner of Manhattan that's hard to find and one player finds it, that's awesome. That's so I can't believe that one person found it and loves it, and they posted on Twitter about it, and now everybody's looking for that thing I hid in a corner. Like that's one of the more fun parts of our job is the
that's the joy of video games, isn't it? Like exactly, it's interactivity. It's something you don't get with a book or a film. It's right. You can work with a player in a way you can't, an individual player where you can't get that at all with other mediums.
More recently, you also wrote the Miles Morales Spider-Man game, which was obviously a big hit, but a very different type of game from the sort of Telltale narrative games, and almost like a sandbox for the player to play in. But there is this obviously very impactful more linear story throughout the game. So does your is the writing process for that type of game any different, or is it the same basic approach that you take?
It's definitely different because in that case, for a single player game like Miles Morales, you're not, okay, we have 3 Batmen or we have, a Clementine who's trying to shape this kid. We have a very strong central character. So we're diving into who is Miles, what kind of arc does he need to go through? What kind of changes does he need to go through? What are, what's the version of him in the comics versus Spider-Verse versus our Miles? Like, what are the differences and similarities? So it is different in that regard. And then you're right, like with a single player story, it is much more similar to other types of writing in that you're plotting out beats and one big character arc and all these other characters. But there are still ways in which we need to use what I call and what a lot of people call conditional dialogue, which is some of the dialogue changes depending on what you've done in the story. So the big one for us on Miles was there was a quest line that I wrote that was the Harlem quest line, which is Miles can do all of these things specifically to help his new neighbors in Harlem and kind of become known as the neighborhood Spider-Man in Harlem. And if you don't do them for the entire story, like you just don't do the side content, that's fine. Like the main story doesn't change in a big way. But if you do them, you have certain moments where there are different lines of dialogue from people that you're meeting because they recognize you. You have a lot of people who show up in the ending, like to kind of cheer you on, or people that you met in the Harlem quest line. So we're still thinking of, these different ways the story is reacting to you, just maybe not as dramatically as a Telltale game would, but it's still there. It was me and Charlie Carucci was the designer of the Harlem quest line, and we were both kind of putting our heads together trying to come up with all these conditionals and how it could be played out of order and all the stuff that you can only do in a video game.
Yeah, that's something I always kind of thought about when you've got an open world sandbox like that, when you've got players who could be triggering a dialogue, but then they could turn around and go back, or they could miss something, or how do you plan for that, or is it, or how do you write? Is it possible to write something in a way that no matter which order they do something, or if they start something then stop and turn around and leave it, how much do you lock someone in to make sure the story makes sense?
Sure. I mean, that is, I think, the biggest challenge of open world games, and not just for Insomniac. For every time I play an open world game, I have this thought, is pacing, right? Because even if your main story has really good pacing, if somebody stops after a mission and then just kind of swings around for 4 hours, they might be feeling like, oh, the pacing's really dropped off. And it's like, no, it was you. You did it. We didn't do that. But I do that all the time. I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I stopped the main story so I could just walk around the countryside. And I'm like, oh, wow, it really slowed down. I'm like, no, you slowed down, genius. Like, get back to the story. So that is really tricky. And I think in terms of what we can control, making sure like side content is side content. Don't try to treat it like mainline content. If it is something that the player character wouldn't or couldn't know until a certain point in the main story, make sure you gate it behind those main story points. It can't be triggered till then. But otherwise, I tend to be on team, don't make side content have a huge impact on the main story, because it's just not really fair to the player who thought they could mop all that up after the main story. But I know different people have different feelings on that. That's just my take.
And
I also
sorry, no, when you go turn.
I was just gonna say, as an aside, I had heard that the voice actors in the Spider-Man games had to record every line twice. Once for if their character was running, and one if they were swinging. So if they were swinging, it was more kind of like breathy and like panting, and then if they're on the ground, it was more just kind of normal. Is that true? That
is true. They have we call like swinging lines and not swinging lines, essentially. So like if Spider-Man has been swinging, but now he's just kind of hanging out on a rooftop, it will trigger one type of line. And if he's still swinging, it will trigger the other read of the line.
That's amazing. Because I remember having that thought when I was running and there's having a chat with someone, and then you start swinging and suddenly he's like breathy. And I was like, how does it know that I'm swinging now? Like it was, obviously the answer is you record everything twice. And
it's
a massive job.
Oh yeah, I mean the programming and the audio team at Insomniac is just so great. I mean, I'm impressed by them at all times anyway, which is great because we work very closely together. But like they're phenomenal. It's the things that they pick up on. It'll be like I'm playing through the game and I don't really notice, and they're like, oh, oops, the like resting version of the line just triggered and you were swinging, so we have to fix that bug. And I'm like, I didn't even hear it. What are you talking about? But yeah, it really does help with the immersion. I remember a bug before Miles released, we fixed it, but there was a bug where only his swinging lines were triggering for a minute. And it was like, why is he screaming? And it's like, but when you're swinging, it makes sense. So it's a really cool system for sure.
But as a writer as well, it must be good fun to be able to, you've got the main story that you're writing obviously and something like that, but to sort of dive deeper into the sort of little bits of in other games it'd be lore, I suppose, but just the things people say on the street or the little interactions that a character has, it lets you build up the characters in the story in a way that you can't really in other formats.
Yeah, I mean, you're building a whole world. You're not just building your main story. You are building an entire universe right there. I mean, for example, like, yes, all of the pedestrian conversations, we wrote those, what they're talking about. And another big one was Miles' social media page. That was crowdsourced. Like a lot of people in Insomniac contribute that, but I was kind of curating it and I was adding a bunch too. And it's just like, writing tweets for people in the Spider-Man universe, and it was really fun. It is a different part of our job.
And how much control do Marvel have? Like, do they have quite a lot of say in things like you can't say this word, or you can't speak like that, or you can't have this character, etc.?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's their character, and they understand the character and the limits of that character and kind of that character's moral compass and limits and how ways they would react to things. So I wouldn't say that Marvel. It's not that Marvel has a rubber stamp or not. It's that Marvel is there, like in every milestone. I mean, they play the builds, they read the outlines, they read the scripts. And again, they're not rubber stamping or not, but they are saying, hey, this doesn't really sound like Peter, or this doesn't really sound like something, Doc Ock would do, or like they have that feedback, and it's really helpful, right? Because we're all like we've read the comics, but like it's good to have other opinions with that really deep kind of lore that they can call on that we might have missed, frankly.
Yeah. I suppose at the end of the day, you want it to feel like a comic as much as everyone who plays it. So as everyone's been on the same page and make it as close to the authentic product as
although giving it your own twist as well, presumably.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because I think there's also, I mean, one of the tricky things about any character that's been around for a long time is finding your kind of version and your take. I mean, Insomniac's Peter Parker is different than a Peter Parker that you've seen in the movies, and is different than various runs of the comics, but he still has a lot of the traits that you would come to expect from Spider-Man. You know, he still believes in his sense of responsibility. He still believes in helping people. He still isn't doing it for money. You know, there's all of these, I don't want to say limits because it has a negative connotation, but it is like limits on, there are ways he would not act ever, but the actual interpretation of him has little tweaks depending on the team building him.
And I was going to ask about as well, because you've also worked on some comics as well, which is another form of collaborative writing in a way, because obviously you've got your artistic team as well. Is your approach to that writing any different to your video game writing?
It's similar in that they're both scripts, and it is similar in that they're both visual. So one of the biggest differences between that and say writing prose is what I'm looking at when I'm writing doesn't look anything like the final product. So I have to be very cognizant of and humble about the fact that I'm just making a blueprint, right? Like, this is not what the player is going to see. It's not what the comic reader is going to see. So I have to be as clear and descriptive as interesting as I can before I hand off that script to an audio department, an artist, a set of artists, an animator. It's much more about being clear in those action lines, and then trusting my collaborator to read it and then to interpret the best way they can. And it also, once you've handed it off, I mean, you're still a collaborator. They're still going to talk to you and ask your opinion on things. But I think it behooves you as a writer to not have a vice-like grip on the final product, like to really treat artists and animators and designers and everybody as collaborators, because what they are. They might read your action line and come up with something way better, and awesome. Like, great. We should welcome that. We should, well, that's not how I pictured it. Well, who cares? It's cooler. Like, I described that building as green and they painted it pink. Like, I don't care.
So it's all to serve the larger
right.
goal. Yeah, totally. And later on this year, you have a book, Gamer Girls, which is out in June, I think it is.
Yeah, comes out.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the book's about?
So Gamer Girls is a series of profiles on 25 women who worked in kind of the earlier years of video game development, and either maybe they did get a lot of attention, but we don't know the whole story, like in the case of Amy Hennig or Roberta Williams. Or maybe they didn't get a ton of attention, but they what they were making and what they were building had a huge impact on other designers down the line, whether they knew it or not. Like Muriel Tramis and Danielle Buttonberry and Donna Bailey are a few that come to mind. So it's all these women who were working in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the early 90s who had this massive impact on how games are made and why they're made and what we play. That you might never have heard of, but you totally should.
Awesome. And Amy Hennig one's in. Oh, sorry,
I was just going to say, is the industry opening up more? Because obviously the sort of, I can't think of the word. the sort of representation of the industry is very male orientated, but is it now opening up more as an industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, according to the data we have, yes, there are more. It is becoming slowly but steadily more diverse in terms of race and gender, and like is great. The where we're still working and will be working for a long time is, it's one thing to bring people into this industry. It's another thing to then treat them well and keep them there, right? So, part of the reason I wanted to write the book, and this is the intro of the book, but part of the reason I wanted to write it is young women that I've talked to, that I've mentored, the only headlines they see are the stories about harassment and abuse. And like, obviously those stories need to be reported. That needs to be stopped. But also I really wanted to let those young women know, and it is a YA book, I wanted to let young people know that that's not all this industry is, and it's certainly not what this industry has to be. Those are the worst parts of the industry that need to be expunged immediately, and like just eat it out of the industry. But but that's not all we are either. There are passionate, creative, thoughtful, kind women, and and men and people of other genders who also work in this industry and are supporting one another. So I wanted to show kind of that side of it too. It's not all bad and doom and gloom, and it will continue getting better as people like these women are promoted and kept and respected and listened to, is part of the book as well.
And I suppose over time, I'd imagine the biggest thing is you're getting more women into the industry, but are they leading teams? Like are they like the ones I always think of, the head of Activision, Naughty Dog, etc. It's all men, and it's all especially with Activision, you get names in the paper for the wrong reasons, etc. But it feels like would that be the biggest way to make change, would be to have women rise up to the top of the company to actually be able to make big change?
I think that's a huge part of it. Again, like in general, I think it can be a little deceptive to say, oh, hey, half our company is women. But if you actually dig into the stat, and they're all junior level. Like,
exactly.
So we didn't really nail that one. You do need people at all levels of seniority. And I've said before, like when you're trying to recruit more diversely, one of the biggest ways you can tell on yourself is if all of the people interviewing those people coming in are middle-aged white guys. Okay, well, what does that tell me? That tells me these are the people getting promoted who have decision-making power, right? So it is about not just recruiting people, but also training them up and giving them opportunities and listening to them when they're having issues with your culture and adjusting that culture appropriately, and really trying to focus on retainment as much as recruitment. And you're right, like the more we can get diversity at the top, the better things will get. And then also we have data that people of marginalized backgrounds tend to stay in studios longer when there are people who look like them. Like that's just true. If you have, we recruited one woman in a studio of 89 men, she might, even if they're all real nice to her, she might be tempted to jump ship for the studio over there that has 15 women, in a studio of 30 people. So that's another factor to consider.
And you're now working on, I think, the Wolverine game that was announced, which is another obviously Marvel property. And is it fun playing in the sandbox of these? You've done Batman, done Walking Dead, these things that other people, that these characters that other people have created and so many people love. Is it good fun playing in that sandbox?
Yeah, there are two angles to that I love. First of all, my favorite genre to read when I'm just on my own is historical fiction. And I think there's a lot in common with I have to do a lot of research in order to write this. I need to know who are the big players and what were the big issues and what, that's all true if you're working in an IP, if you're working in history, it's just a lot of research. And the second thing is, I grew up with Wolverine. Wolverine was my dude. He was one of my favorite superheroes. I watched animated X-Men as a kid, and Wolverine was my favorite. And I couldn't tell you why. We don't have a lot in common. We don't look alike. But I love that guy. Every time he was on screen, he's snarking at somebody and popping claws. And so to get the chance to then kind of write him and understand him, it's awesome. 8-year-old me is bouncing off the walls all the time.
I mean, you've worked on Spider-Man, you've worked on Wolverine, you've written comics. Would you want to write a Marvel comic? Is that something which you'd be interested in doing?
I would. I don't know when I would have time. Frankly. Yes, caveat. I need sleep. So last semester I taught narrative design in college, and I'm taking a bit of a break right now because between I wrote 2 comics and I was finishing the book and I was teaching a class and still working at Insomniac, and I was this is a little too much. So right now I'm on a bit of a chill.
Fair enough.
That sounds fair enough. My next question will probably get a similar response, but I was just wondering if, maybe not now, but in the future, would you want to ever write a screenplay for a film?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I would be, if I had a really brilliant idea, yes. I haven't yet, the muse has not woken me in the middle of the night going, this is your screenplay. Yeah. But I would certainly be interested. I think at this phase, I would be more interested in television than film. I mean, and I say that caveat, I've never done it. So I'm not saying and I could swoop in and be brilliant. I would certainly need, mentorship from more experienced writers, but TV, much like Telltale, it has that great episodic nature. Yeah. It has these long storylines that you can really dig into your characters. I think that's what I would look at first. But yeah, I would be interested in that too. I mean, I started writing comics just kind of to see if I liked writing comics, and I did. So I'm kind of open to trying different media and seeing how it goes at any given time.
Cool.
Awesome. So you've got Wolverine coming out, or at some point you're working on that just now. You've got your book coming out in June. What's next? What else is on the plate?
Oh, let's see. What am I allowed to talk about? Yeah. So I have a few whip projects in my back pocket, none of which are announced yet, unfortunately. Fair but I do. Yeah, I'm still cranking out ideas as best I can. We'll see. Follow me on the internet and you know, something exciting might happen.
Excellent.
Given time. I don't know.
What was the last game that you played?
So last night, and it is completely because of the trailer reveal yesterday, I actually started replaying The Wolf Among Us, which is my favorite Telltale game. Yeah. Obviously, I haven't worked at Telltale in a few years because of the 2018, everything that happened. But just being able to sink back into that kind of writing and that story and that world, I was immediately, it felt like sinking into a bubble bath. It was oh yes, I love this story. So I started replaying it last night. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's maybe my favorite one as well. I never read Fables at all before that, but I thought they did an amazing job of this really cool world, which and just a really good, the characters were just fantastic, and yeah, I've been looking forward to part 2 for quite a while, so I've got high hopes for it.
I'm gonna have to duck back in. The art style is so good. I mean, the saturated colors and the noir feeling, and Bigby's a great character. Yeah. It's I love everything about it. Yeah.
What about the last film that you watched?
Oh gosh, what was it? Hold on, this one might take a second. Because I usually binge films with my husband over the weekend. I'm it was one of those 12. What? Hold on one sec. This is embarrassing. Oh, I think it was actually Rogue One. Weirdly enough.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Nice. I was, and I watched that one by myself. I didn't even invite the husband. Someone had been talking about it again on the internet. We've been watching the Boba Fett show, a lot of America, and I was just kind of pulled into, oh yeah, all this stuff that happened before the original trilogy is really interesting. So I went back, watched Rogue One, cried again. Life was great. Good.
Well, that might answer my next question, which is, what is the last TV show that you watched or are watching?
It would have been Boba Fett, except I watched an episode of You season 3 this morning. So
okay.
You season 3.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's
a show that
man.
I tried to watch. I bounced off that in the first season. That one about the serial killer. He kidnaps the girl. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't get through. I know everyone loves it, but I couldn't click on it for some reason.
Season 1 really sucked me in. I watched the whole season and then I rewatched the whole season immediately because it was really tightly plotted. It was really good at cliffhangers without them feeling like cliffhangers. They just did a really good job with season 1, and I don't know why I didn't watch season 3 when it first came out. I was probably just doing other things, but I'm now getting my way through it, and it's really good again too. I mean, in my opinion.
Awesome. The very, very last thing we always do is a super quick fire either or. So I always say there's no right answer apart from one, and we'll start off with a Batman or a Spider-Man.
Oh, I can't pick between my boys. No, I'm choosing or. Circling or on the top.
Last of Us or Life is Strange?
Last of Us barely edges out. Oh, this is hard. This is the hardest part of the interview.
TV or cinema?
TV or what? Or cinema?
Yeah.
TV. I'll go with TV.
Nice.
A fancy restaurant or a takeout?
Takeout, because I get to wear sweatpants. I enjoy it.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
My heart says real book, but my schedule says the book's on my phone.
That's the correct answer I was looking for. Ebook, that's fine. No, it's fine. You went with your brain. That's sensible. That's fine.
Tarek's a big ebook advocate, as you can tell.
Yeah,
and there's not a lot of us out there. Yeah, I feel it's a losing fight. I have a lot of guests in the show, so I'm glad to find something in my corner at last. That's fine.
Well, I feel like on weekends when I'm just trying to spend a lot of time reading, it's the real book. But when I'm like in a doctor's office waiting, or I'm in like, I don't know, I'm like
the
killing time. I just have my cell phone. The ebook's right there. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No,
although actually a lot of guests are now saying audiobooks as well as the other option.
I wish I had a better attention span, because every time I try to listen to an audiobook, but not podcasts, weirdly enough, just audiobooks, like my mind wanders in 18 directions, and then they're talking about something. I'm like, wait, what? Why is he over there? What happened?
I know what you mean. It's weird. The podcast, they grab me more than I love an audiobook. But
I think with a podcast, because it's like a conversation, you can kind of be distracted a bit, but you're still sort of taking it in.
And it's maybe someone talking to you as well.
A book, you can miss a line or two and suddenly you don't know what the heck's going on.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. You can dip in and out of conversations like we all do, but not so much when it's like, oh, hey, we've set up this whole conflict that you need to understand. I'm like,
yeah. Why are they fighting it?
Oh, that ain't it.
I really enjoyed that chat. That was really interesting. I've enjoyed a lot of those games, and it's always fun to see how they're made and peek behind the scenes a little bit. And I have to say, the whole having to record the dialogue twice for Spider-Man is one of these things that you would never thought of as you're playing it, but when you realise, of course, somebody has to do both.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's not like the AI isn't clever enough to change someone's voice
just
if
add
you're
on the
moving and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, it was really interesting. And obviously amazing, portfolio of games that Mary's working on. Really looking forward to the Wolverine game as well.
Yeah, I'm very psyched for that.
And obviously her book Gamer Girls is out soon. I think it's in
July,
a couple of months.
2022.
Yeah. So that sounds really interesting as well, because I used to play, the Sierra Online games and all that sort of stuff as well that are featured in that. So it sounds great. So do pre-order that. Thanks very much to Mary for coming on to the podcast. And we have another great guest next week.
We do indeed. We are chatting with Sam Holland. And Sam, her debut novel is The Echo Man, and that's just out April this year, so pretty new. And it's a fantastic read. I read it recently, and it's about a serial killer who is copying the MOs of all the famous serial killers throughout history. So you've got your Jack the Ripper, your Ted Bundy, your
it's a really interesting idea, because it's one of these ideas that you think, of course.
I know.
When someone tells you,
totally, that's exactly what I thought. That why didn't I think of that idea? It's a great idea, and it's just, and if you're a fan of these kind of like dark horror-y novels, Zodiac, etc., it's right up your street. And it's a really fun chat. Yeah,
no, it is. Sam was good fun. So yeah, please do tune in for that episode. Now, I mentioned at the start of the podcast that we would be doing a live chat with Adrian Tchaikovsky, and we're recording that at Chimera Festival, which is the science fiction, fantasy and horror literature festival in Edinburgh, and that's over the Jubilee weekend, I believe, the 3rd to the 5th.
Is the Queen coming?
June. Yeah, I think so. I think she's doing a video message. Yeah, she might send us a question for our podcast. But our show, if you are in Edinburgh and fancy coming along, the tickets are free, but you do need a ticket, and you can book them on the Chimera website. We'll put a link to that in the podcast description, and it's on Saturday at 1:00, I think.
Yep.
So
I mean,
yeah,
Festival of Science Fiction, Fantasy, Horror, Adrian Tchaikovsky, us, free. What I'm not seeing a downside here, Marco.
and even more than that, Tarek, you will also be able to buy a discounted page one notebook if you
Gets
attend at
better.
the festival.
It just gets better.
Exactly. So yeah, it would be great to see you there. We'll have questions from the listeners, and if you do have a question for Adrian, please do feel free to send that in to us.
We should also say that we'll be there all weekend selling the notebook. So if anybody just wants to pop along and say hi, they're more than welcome to. Always nice to meet a fan.
Exactly.
Still to meet one, so there must be one out there somewhere.
Exactly. That isn't your mum.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, she's coming. Don't worry, she'll be there.
But if you did enjoy the episode, as ever, please do take time to give us a rating and review, if possible, on Apple Podcasts or whatever your favourite podcast app is, because that really helps us in the charts. And if you can also encourage others to like and subscribe and all of that stuff, then that's a huge help as well.
And of course, if you would like to get in touch, perhaps to send us a question for Adrian Tchaikovsky, you can always do so by sending a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @right_gear, or you can send us an email, which is podcast@rightgear.co.uk.
But otherwise, have a great week, and we'll speak to you next week.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.